The thunder rolled across the Montana sky as Rachel Morgan clutched her swollen belly and pushed forward against the driving rain. Her dress, once a respectable garment, now hung in tatters around her ankles, soaked through and caked with mud from the long journey. She had been walking for 3 days since the stagecoach had left her behind in the last settlement, her meager savings stolen by the man who had promised to marry her when they reached Helena. October 1878 was proving to be a cruel month, and as lightning split the darkening sky, Rachel knew she needed shelter before nightfall. The small ranch appeared like a mirage on the horizon, a humble cabin with a large barn standing sentinel against the gathering storm. Rachel's feet, blistered and raw, carried her the final quarter-mile with pure determination. She was 7 months along, and the child within her kicked as if sharing her desperation. No lights shone from the cabin windows, but smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone might be home. "Hello," Rachel called out, her voice thin against the howling wind. No answer came. She tried again, knocking firmly on the rough-hewn door, but the cabin remained silent. The rain intensified, and with a groan of pain, Rachel made her decision. The barn door wasn't locked, merely latched, and she pulled it open with trembling hands. Inside, the sweet smell of hay and horses greeted her. A large palomino nickered softly from its stall, but otherwise the barn was quiet. Rachel found a ladder leading to a hayloft and, gathering the last of her strength, climbed awkwardly up. The soft hay beckoned, and she collapsed into it, pulling stray strands over herself for warmth. Her last thought before exhaustion claimed her was a prayer that whoever owned this place would show mercy to a woman in her condition. Finn Blackwood returned to his ranch just after midnight, leading his tired horse through the pelting rain. The cattle were secure, but the storm had delayed his return by hours. After settling his mount in the barn, Finn climbed wearily up to the hayloft to grab fresh bedding for the stall. The lantern light fell across a strange shape in the hay, and he froze, hand instinctively moving to his revolver. "Who's there?" he demanded, raising the light higher. The figure stirred, and Finn found himself staring at a woman, her face pale and drawn, with dark auburn hair tumbling around her shoulders. But what caught his attention was the unmistakable swell of her belly beneath the threadbare dress. The woman's eyes flew open, wide with fear. "Please," she whispered, attempting to scramble backward in the hay. "I mean no harm. The storm, I had nowhere else to go." Finn lowered his lantern, his weathered face softening. In 10 years of ranching this lonely stretch of Montana territory, he'd seen all manner of travelers and drifters, but never a pregnant woman alone. "I've waited years for a woman like you," the cowboy told the pregnant stranger sleeping in his hay. His voice was gentle, almost reverent. "Someone who needs this place as much as it needs someone to care for." Rachel stared at him, confusion replacing fear in her eyes. The man before her stood tall, his shoulders broad beneath a rain-soaked coat. His face, illuminated by lantern light, was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw covered in several days' growth of beard. His eyes, though they were kind, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "I don't understand," Rachel said, one protective hand moving to her belly. Finn set the lantern down and removed his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat fields in summer. "This place, it's too big for one man. Been that way since my wife passed 5 years back." He cleared his throat. "What I mean to say is, you're welcome here, for as long as you need." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. After months of betrayal and hardship, kindness felt almost foreign. "I'm Rachel," she said. "Rachel Morgan. Finn Blackwood," he replied with a slight nod. "Now let's get you into the house before you catch your death out here." Inside the cabin, Finn moved with surprising efficiency for a man who had lived alone for years. He stoked the fire in the stone hearth until it blazed warmly, filling the one-room cabin with golden light. From a trunk near the bed, he produced a worn but clean nightgown. "Martha's," he explained simply. "My late wife never could bring myself to part with her things." Rachel accepted the garment gratefully. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Blackwood." "Finn," he corrected, turning his back to give her privacy. "And no need for sorrow on my account. Life takes what it takes." As Rachel changed behind him, Finn prepared a simple meal of beans and salt pork from his pantry. The silence between them was strangely comfortable, as if they'd known each other longer than the few minutes since their meeting. The father. Finn asked finally, setting a plate before her as she sat wrapped in the borrowed nightgown, her wet dress hanging near the fire to dry. Rachel's face hardened. Gone. Took my savings and disappeared 3 days ago. Said he couldn't marry a woman carrying another man's child. She looked down. That was a lie too. The child is his, but I suppose it was easier than admitting he never intended to marry me at all. Finn nodded slowly, taking a seat across from her. Some men don't deserve the name. This child deserves better, Rachel said, her voice strengthening. I was heading to Helena. My cousin lives there at least. She did 2 years ago when we last corresponded. I thought perhaps. Helena's still a good 2 days' ride, Finn said, and in your condition I wouldn't recommend traveling alone. Rachel's shoulders slumped. I have nowhere else to go. Finn was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the firelight. At 35, he had resigned himself to solitude after Martha's death from fever. The ranch kept him busy, and the occasional trips into town for supplies fulfilled what little need for company he had. But something about this woman, her courage, her determination stirred feelings he thought long buried. Stay, he said simply, at least until the baby comes. I've got the room and winter's coming on fast. No sense in risking both your lives when there's shelter here. Rachel looked up, searching his face for any sign of deception. She had trusted too easily before. Why would you do that for a stranger? Finn's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. Maybe I'm tired of talking to horses. He stood and began clearing the dishes. There's the bed for you. I'll take the chair by the fire. I couldn't possibly. You can and you will, Finn said firmly. For the child's sake, if not your own. That night, as Rachel lay in Finn's bed, listening to the rain drumming on the cabin roof, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: safety. The quiet breathing of the cowboy sleeping in the chair by the dying fire was strangely comforting. Whatever tomorrow would bring, tonight she was sheltered from the storm. Morning came with clear skies and brilliant sunshine that streamed through the cabin's small windows. Rachel woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Finn moving about the cabin. Morning, he said when he noticed her stirring. Thought you might sleep till noon, the state you were in last night. Rachel sat up, smoothing back her tangled hair. I haven't slept that well in months. She accepted the cup of coffee he offered, though she took only a small sip, mindful of the baby. Got some work to tend to, Finn said, pulling on his coat. Make yourself at home. There's bread in the bin and preserves on the shelf. I'll be back midday. Before Rachel could thank him, he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. Left alone, she took stock of her surroundings for the first time in daylight. The cabin was simple but well built, with sturdy furniture that showed signs of careful craftsmanship. A bookshelf held a surprising number of volumes, and a small writing desk stood in one corner, papers neatly stacked. Despite her fatigue, Rachel couldn't sit idle. Her dress had dried overnight, and though it was shabby, it was wearable. She dressed and set about tidying the cabin, needing to repay Finn's kindness in some small way. She found a broom and swept, dusted the shelves, and even managed to prepare a stew from vegetables she discovered in a root cellar accessed through a trapdoor in the floor. When Finn returned, the scent of cooking food greeted him. He paused in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You didn't need to do all this, he said, removing his hat. Rachel stood by the stove, suddenly uncertain. I wanted to thank you. Finn nodded once, his eyes taking in the transformed cabin. Been a while since these walls saw a woman's touch. He hung his coat by the door. Smells good. They ate together, the silence broken only by occasional comments about the weather or the taste of the stew. Rachel learned that Finn had built the ranch himself after returning from the war, that he ran cattle on 200 acres, and that his nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. What about you? He asked finally. Where were you before everything went wrong? Rachel gave a small, sad smile. St. Louis, I was a seamstress for a dressmaker there when I found myself in trouble. My employer dismissed me. Decency, she said. Rachel's hand drifted to her belly. Robert, that was his name, said he'd marry me, that we'd start fresh out west. Some men make promises they never intend to keep, Finn observed. Yes, Rachel agreed. I've learned that lesson thoroughly now. The days fell into a pattern. Finn would rise before dawn to tend to his ranch work, returning midday for a meal Rachel prepared. She kept the cabin, mended his clothes, and began to feel useful again. They spoke little, but the silences grew comfortable. At night, despite her protests, Finn continued to sleep in the chair while she took the bed. A week passed, and then another. October gave way to November, and the first light snow dusted the mountains visible from the cabin door. Rachel's time grew closer, and with it, a sense of dread. What would happen after the baby came? Finn had been kind, but she couldn't impose on him forever. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Rachel broached the subject. I should try to reach Helena before the mountain passes become impassable, she said quietly. Finn looked up from the bridle he was repairing. Not in your condition. The baby will come within a month, Rachel pointed out. I can't stay here indefinitely, Finn's hands stilled. Why not? The question hung in the air between them. Rachel stared at him, trying to read his expression in the firelight. Because this is your home, she said finally, not mine. Finn set the bridle aside and leaned forward, his forearms resting on his knees. I meant what I said that first night, Rachel. This place, it's too big for just one person, too quiet. He looked away, seemingly embarrassed by his own words. Having you here has been good. Rachel felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. It's been good for me too, Finn. He stood abruptly, moving to the window to look out at the snow-covered yard. I'm not asking anything of you, just saying you're welcome to stay, for the winter at least, then you can decide. Rachel watched his back, the strong lines of his shoulders tense beneath his shirt. In the weeks she had known him, Finn Blackwood had shown her nothing but respect and kindness. He never pressed for details she didn't offer, never made her feel like a burden. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. Thank you, she said softly. I'd like to stay. The next day brought a change in the weather and in their relationship. A fierce blizzard swept down from the mountains, confining them to the cabin. Finn brought extra wood inside, banking the fire to last through the night. Storm like this could last days, he said, brushing snow from his coat. Lucky we're well stocked. The enforced closeness created a new intimacy between them. With nowhere to go and nothing pressing to be done, they talked more than they had in all the previous weeks combined. Rachel learned about Finn's childhood in Pennsylvania, his time fighting for the Union, and how he had met Martha when he came west after the war. In turn, she told him about growing up with her grandmother after her parents died of cholera, about her dreams of someday owning her own dress shop. And now, Finn asked as afternoon faded to evening, what do you dream of now? Rachel's hand rested on her belly where the baby kicked steadily. Safety, she said honestly. A place where my child can grow up without shame, where we can both hold our heads up. Finn nodded slowly. Decent folk don't judge a child for the circumstances of its birth. The world is not always filled with decent folk, Rachel replied with a sad smile. Maybe not, Finn agreed, but there are enough of us to make a difference. That night, as the wind howled around the cabin eaves, Rachel woke to find Finn restless in his chair, his face contorted in what appeared to be pain. Finn, she called softly. He jerked awake, his eyes wild for a moment before focusing on her face. Rachel, I'm sorry, did I wake you? You were dreaming, she said, sitting up. Something bad from the look of it. Finn rubbed a hand over his face. The war still comes back sometimes. He stood, stretching his tall frame. Don't worry about it. That chair can't be comfortable, Rachel observed. The bed is big enough for both of us. I trust you, Finn. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light. It's not proper. Rachel laughed softly. I'm an unmarried woman 7 months pregnant, living in a cabin with a man I met a month ago. I think propriety is the least of my concerns. A smile tugged at the corner of Finn's mouth. You have a point. He moved to the bed, hesitating before sitting on the edge and removing his boots. Rachel shifted to make room and they lay side by side, not touching but close enough to feel each other's warmth. Thank you, Finn said quietly, for understanding about the dreams. We all have our ghosts, Rachel replied, thinking of her own mistakes and regrets. They fell asleep like that, a careful distance maintained between them. But when Rachel woke in the gray light of dawn, she found herself curled against Finn's side, his arm protectively around her shoulders, his hand resting lightly on her belly where the baby kicked a greeting to the new day. The blizzard lasted 3 days, trapping them in a world of white. When it finally cleared, Finn spent long hours digging out paths to the barn and checking on his cattle. Rachel watched from the window, admiring his strength and determination. She had never known a man like him, steady, reliable, without pretense or false charm. As November deepened toward December, Rachel's time grew imminent. The baby dropped lower and her back ached constantly. Finn noticed her discomfort and fashioned a chair with extra cushions to ease her pain. He brought in a large copper tub and filled it with heated water so she could soak her swollen feet and ankles. Martha always said there was nothing worse than the last month, he commented one evening as he helped Rachel from the tub, his strong hands steadying her. Except maybe the actual birth. Rachel smiled weakly. I'm frightened, Finn, I don't know what to expect. His eyes met hers, serious and steady. I sent word to town with the supply wagon that passed through yesterday. Ask the doctor to come out when he can, and Mrs. Peterson from the next ranch over, she's delivered half the babies in the county. Tears filled Rachel's eyes. You thought of everything. Finn's hand lingered on her arm. I try to. His voice was gruff, but his eyes were gentle. That night, sleeping beside him had become routine. Rachel felt the first sharp pain. She gasped, clutching her belly. Finn was instantly awake. Is it time? He asked, his voice calm though his eyes betrayed his concern. Rachel nodded, unable to speak as another contraction seized her. Finn moved with surprising efficiency, stoking the fire, heating water, and laying out the clean linens he had prepared for this moment. The doctor, Rachel managed between contractions. Finn shook his head. Storms come up again. We're on our own for now. Fear gripped Rachel as strongly as the pain. Finn, I can't. He took her hand, his calloused fingers strong and reassuring. You can. You're the strongest woman I know, Rachel Morgan. The labor lasted through the night, Finn never leaving her side. He wiped her brow, held her hands when she needed to push, and spoke words of encouragement that kept her tethered to hope when pain threatened to overwhelm her. As dawn broke, clear and cold, Rachel gave a final, tremendous push, and her daughter entered the world with a lusty cry. A girl, Finn announced, his voice thick with emotion as he wrapped the infant in a soft blanket. A perfect little girl. He placed the baby in Rachel's arms, and she looked down at the tiny face, overcome with love and wonder. She's beautiful, Rachel whispered. Like her mother, Finn said quietly. Rachel looked up at him, seeing in his eyes something she had been too afraid to acknowledge before. Love, not pity or obligation, but genuine love. Thank you, she said, reaching for his hand. For everything. Finn's fingers tightened around hers. No, Rachel, thank you for bringing life back to this place. To me. In the days that followed, Finn showed a surprising aptitude for caring for the infant, whom Rachel named Faith. He cradled her with hands that could break a wild horse, sang to her with a voice that rarely spoke more than necessary, and watched over both mother and child with fierce protectiveness. Dr. Williams arrived a week after Faith's birth, having finally made it through the snow. He examined both Rachel and the baby, pronouncing them healthy. You did well, Blackwood, the doctor said as he prepared to leave. Not many men could have handled a birth on their own. Finn shrugged. Wasn't much different than calving season, he said, though the pride in his eyes belied his casual tone. As December gave way to January and the Montana winter settled in earnest around the small ranch, Rachel found herself thinking less and less about Helena and her cousin. The cabin had become home, Faith was thriving, and Finn had become the center of her world in ways she had never anticipated. One evening, as Faith slept in the cradle Finn had crafted for her, Rachel sat mending by the fire while Finn read from one of his books. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, how natural it felt, how right. Finn, she said, setting aside her sewing. What happens when spring comes? He looked up, his blue eyes serious. That depends on you. Rachel took a deep breath. When we met, you said you'd waited years for a woman like me. Did you mean it? Finn closed his book, his expression solemn. Every word. From the moment I saw you in that hayloft, I knew something had changed, that you were meant to be here. He paused. But I won't hold you if you want to go, Rachel. You and Faith deserve whatever life you choose. Rachel moved to sit beside him, taking his rough hands in hers. What if I choose this life? With you, the hope that dawned in Finn's eyes was almost painful to witness. You'd stay. Knowing what a hard life it is out here. It's not so hard, Rachel said softly. Not when you're not alone. Finn reached out, his fingers gently touching her cheek. I'm not a young man, Rachel. I'm set in my ways. I can't promise to be easy to live with. You've been nothing but kind and good these past months, Rachel said. That's more than most women ever find in a lifetime. And Faith, Finn asked, glancing at the sleeping infant. What would I be to her? Rachel's heart swelled with certainty. Her father, if you'll have us both. Finn's answer was to draw her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the tenderness and passion he had kept carefully contained. Rachel responded in kind, realizing that she had been falling in love with this quiet, steadfast man from the moment he found her in his hayloft. When they finally parted, Finn rested his forehead against hers. I never thought I'd have this again, he admitted. A family, someone to come home to. Neither did I, Rachel confessed. After Robert left, I thought my chance at happiness was gone. He was a fool, Finn said firmly. And I'm grateful for it, because it brought you to me. They were married in February, when the first hints of spring began to soften the winter landscape. Judge Wilson rode out from town to perform the ceremony with Dr. Williams and Mrs. Peterson as witnesses. Faith, now 2 months old, slept peacefully in Mrs. Peterson's arms while her mother and Finn exchanged vows before the hearth where they had first begun to know each other. Never seen Blackwood smile so much, the judge commented as they shared a celebratory meal afterward. Marriage suits you, son. Finn's hand found Rachel's under the table, squeezing gently. I've got everything a man could want right here, he said simply. As the guests departed, leaving the new family alone, Rachel felt a sense of completion she had never known before. She stood in the doorway of the cabin, their cabin now watching as Finn bid farewell to the last visitor. When he turned back to her, his face held such love that it took her breath away. Mrs. Blackwood, he said, crossing to her and taking Faith from her arms. That has a fine sound to it. Rachel leaned against him, watching as Faith's tiny hand curled around his finger. Indeed it does, Mr. Blackwood. Spring came in earnest, transforming the ranch. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, new calves dotted the pastures, and Faith grew stronger each day. Rachel planted a garden beside the cabin, and Finn built a small veranda where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset paint the distant mountains. Life settled into new rhythms. Finn taught Rachel to ride, and she began accompanying him on his shorter rounds of the property, Faith securely bundled against her chest. Rachel's skill with a needle proved valuable when neighboring ranchers discovered she could mend and alter clothing far better than anyone in town, bringing in a small but steady income of her own. One evening in late April, as they sat on the veranda watching the stars emerge, Finn seemed unusually quiet. What is it? Rachel asked, leaning against his shoulder. Been thinking, he said slowly. About expanding the house. Rachel looked up at him. Oh. Finn nodded, his arm tightening around her. Faith will need her own room someday, and he hesitated, a rare uncertainty crossing his face. Maybe other children too, if you wanted. Rachel's heart swelled with love for this man who had given her and Faith a home when they had nothing. I would like that very much, she said softly. A house full of children. Finn smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. I never dared hope for so much happiness, he admitted. After Martha died, I thought that part of my life was over. And now? Rachel prompted, her hand finding his. Now I wake up each morning grateful for the storm that brought you to my door, Finn said, bending to kiss her softly. For the woman sleeping in my hay who became the love of my life. Faith's cry from inside the cabin interrupted them, and Rachel rose to tend to her daughter. As she cradled the infant, now beginning to show signs of Finn's blue eyes and her own auburn hair, she thought about the long journey that had brought her here. The pain, the betrayal, the fear, all of it had led to this moment, this family, this love. When Finn joined her inside, taking Faith from her arms to rock the baby back to sleep, Rachel knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. Not in Helena with her cousin, not in St. Louis with its false promises, but here on this remote Montana ranch with a man who had waited years for a woman like her. Summer blazed across the Montana landscape, turning the grasses golden and the skies a brilliant blue. Faith, now 7 months old, was sitting up on her own and babbling constantly, a source of endless delight to both Rachel and Finn. The expanded cabin took shape as Finn worked on it in the early mornings and evenings, adding 2 new rooms and improving the original structure. Rachel had established herself as the county's premier seamstress, with women riding for miles to have her alter their dresses or create new ones from the patterns she ordered from St. Louis. She converted one corner of the cabin into a workspace, and Finn built her a sturdy table where she could cut fabric, and a cabinet to store her growing collection of threads, buttons, and trim. One August afternoon, as Rachel worked on a wedding dress for the banker's daughter in town, Finn came in from the fields earlier than usual. His face was grave and he held a telegram in his hand. "What is it?" Rachel asked, setting aside her sewing. Finn handed her the paper. "Came in on the supply wagon. It's addressed to you." Rachel took it with trembling fingers. No one knew where she was. She had written to her cousin in Helena only after marrying Finn and had received no reply. The telegram was brief and shocking. Robert Hayes arrested Denver stop seeking Rachel Morgan for testimony. Stop contact Sheriff Wilkins. Helena stop. Rachel sank into a chair, the paper fluttering from her fingers. "Robert," she whispered. "They found him." Finn picked up the telegram, reading it again. "What did he do?" "I don't know," Rachel said, her mind racing. "But if they're looking for me to testify." She looked up at Finn, fear in her eyes. What if they find out about Faith? What if he tries to claim her? Finn's jaw tightened. "Faith is my daughter now. I adopted her legally when we married. No court would give her to a criminal." Rachel wasn't so sure. The law often favored blood relations, even unsuitable ones, over adoptive parents. "I should go to Helena," she said finally. "Find out what this is about." Finn nodded slowly. "We'll go together, tomorrow. The ranch can wait," Finn said firmly. "You and Faith are my priority now." That night, as Faith slept peacefully in her new room, Rachel lay awake beside Finn, her mind churning with possibilities. What if Robert had been arrested for something terrible? What if seeing him again brought back all the feelings of shame and betrayal she had finally put behind her? As if sensing her thoughts, Finn pulled her closer. "Whatever happens in Helena," he said quietly, "we face it together." "You're not alone anymore, Rachel." She turned in his arms, burying her face against his chest. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Afraid he'll try to take Faith, afraid of what seeing him will do to me." Finn's hand stroked her hair gently. "Do you still have feelings for him?" Rachel looked up, surprised by the question. "No, not at all. I feel nothing for him now, except perhaps pity." "Then there's nothing to fear," Finn said, his voice certain. "You're stronger than you know, Rachel Blackwood, and I'll be right beside you." The journey to Helena took 2 days by wagon. Faith alternately delighting in the new sights and fussing at the disruption to her routine. They stayed at a small hotel near the courthouse, and early the next morning, Rachel dressed in her best gown, one she had made herself from fabric Finn had brought from town as a surprise, and prepared to meet with Sheriff Wilkins. The sheriff's office was busy, but he received them immediately when Rachel gave her name. A balding man with shrewd eyes and a neatly trimmed mustache, Sheriff Wilkins looked Rachel over carefully. "Mrs. Blackwood, formerly Morgan," he confirmed, glancing at his notes. "Yes," Rachel said, her hand tightly gripping Finn's. "I received your telegram about Robert Hayes." The sheriff nodded. "Hayes has been arrested for fraud and theft across 3 territories. Seems he had a pattern of courting women, gaining their trust, and then absconding with their valuables." He looked at Rachel directly. "You weren't his first victim, madam, but you might help make sure you're his last." Relief flooded through Rachel. This wasn't about Faith at all. "What do you need from me?" "A statement about what he took from you and identification if possible." "He's being held in Denver, but they've sent a photograph." The sheriff produced a grainy image. Rachel stared at the face that had once charmed her so completely. Robert Hayes looked older, harder, but it was unmistakably him. That's him, she confirmed. He took my savings, nearly $300, and abandoned me in White Creek last October. Sheriff Wilkins made notes as Rachel provided details of her time with Robert, including dates and locations. When she finished, he nodded with satisfaction. This will help the case considerably, Mrs. Blackwood. With testimonies like yours from several women, Hayes is looking at a lengthy prison sentence. He doesn't know about my child, does he? Rachel asked, the fear still lingering. The sheriff shook his head. Not from us, madam. And from what I understand, Hayes isn't the type to be interested in family responsibilities. As they left the sheriff's office, Rachel felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Robert was facing justice, and he posed no threat to the life she had built with Finn and Faith. Are you all right? Finn asked as they walked back to their hotel. Rachel squeezed his hand. Better than all right. I feel free, truly free for the first time since this all began. Finn smiled down at her. Good, because I have a surprise for you. Back at the hotel, while Faith napped under the watchful eye of the proprietor's wife, Finn took Rachel to a small shop on the main street. The sign above the door read, Helena Mercantile and Dry Goods. What are we doing here? Rachel asked. Finn led her inside to where a middle-aged woman was arranging fabric bolts on a shelf. Mrs. Templeton, he called. This is my wife, Rachel. The woman turned, her face breaking into a wide smile. So you're Rachel. Finn has told me so much about your sewing skills. She came forward, clasping Rachel's hands warmly. I've been looking for a partner in my shop for ages, someone who can create and alter fine dresses while I handle the everyday merchandise. Rachel looked between Mrs. Templeton and Finn in confusion. Partner. Finn's eyes were bright with excitement. Remember how you said you dreamed of having your own dress shop someday? Well, Mrs. Templeton needs someone with your skills, and she has the space and established clientele. But the ranch, Rachel began, is only a day's ride away, Finn finished. We could come into town once or twice a month. You could work on special orders at home and do fittings when we visit. He took her hands. You've made our house a home, Rachel. I want to help make your dreams come true too. Tears filled Rachel's eyes as she realized what Finn was offering, not just a business opportunity, but a recognition of her as a person with her own ambitions and talents. In all her years, no one had ever supported her dreams this way. What do you say, Mrs. Blackwood, Mrs. Templeton asked, smiling. Shall we go into business together? Rachel looked at Finn, seeing nothing but love and encouragement in his eyes. Yes, she said, her voice strong with certainty. Yes to all of it. They returned to the ranch 3 days later, Rachel's mind buzzing with plans for her new business venture. Finn had arranged for a proper sign to be made for the shop, Templeton and Blackwood Fine Dressmaking, and Mrs. Templeton had already taken orders for 3 wedding dresses that Rachel would create. Life settled into a new rhythm. Rachel sewed at home most days, caring for Faith and maintaining their growing household. Once a month, they traveled to Helena, staying for a few days while Rachel fitted clients and discussed designs with Mrs. Templeton. The arrangement brought in additional income for the ranch and gave Rachel the creative outlet she had always craved. As autumn painted the landscape in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Faith took her first steps across the cabin floor, tottering from Rachel's arms to Finn's outstretched hands. His face, watching his daughter's achievement, held such pride and love that Rachel felt her heart might burst. She's growing so fast, Finn marveled, swinging Faith up into his arms as she reached him. Too fast, Rachel agreed, joining them and kissing Faith's chubby cheek. Soon she'll be running all over the ranch. Finn's arms encircled them both. Just like her mother, unstoppable once she sets her mind to something. That night, after Faith was asleep, Rachel sat on the veranda with Finn, watching the stars emerge above the mountains. His arm was warm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his strength, marveling at how much her life had changed in a single year. I have something to tell you, she said quietly. Finn looked down at her, his eyes questioning. Good news or bad? Rachel smiled, taking his hand and placing it over her stomach. The best news, Faith is going to have a brother or sister come spring. For a moment, Finn was absolutely still, then his face transformed with a joy so pure it brought tears to Rachel's eyes. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." Rachel nodded, her own happiness matching his. "Dr. Williams confirmed it when we were in town. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Finn pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying everything words could not. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I could be this happy," he admitted. "When Martha died, I thought that part of my life was over, and then you appeared in my hayloft like some miracle." "A very bedraggled miracle," Rachel laughed. "The most beautiful sight I'd ever seen," Finn corrected, his voice serious. "I meant what I said that night, Rachel. I had waited years for someone like you, someone who could make this place feel like home again, someone who needed me as much as I needed her." Rachel touched his face gently. "And now we have everything we need, don't we? Each other, Faith, this new little one on the way. And many more to come, I hope," Finn said, his hand protectively covering hers where it rested on her still flat stomach. "A house full of children, just like we talked about." As winter descended once more on the Montana territory, the Blackwood Ranch stood warm and welcoming against the snow. Inside, Rachel worked on tiny garments for the coming baby while Faith played at her feet. Finn had expanded the cabin again, adding a nursery adjacent to their bedroom and improving the kitchen where Rachel loved to bake the bread and pies that filled the house with homey scents. Christmas came, Faith's first real one, and Finn surprised them both with a beautiful rocking horse he had carved in secret over many evenings. Rachel's gift to him was a new coat she had crafted from the finest wool she could find, lined with soft flannel and fitted perfectly to his broad shoulders. "It's too fine for ranch work," he protested, though his eyes shone with pleasure as he tried it on. "Then you'll wear it to church and to town," Rachel insisted. "My husband deserves the best." New Year's Eve found them sitting before the fire, Faith asleep in her room as they talked about their hopes for the coming year. "The baby will come in April," Rachel said, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Just when everything is turning green again." "Perfect timing," Finn agreed, "and by then the new barn will be finished." "New barn?" Rachel looked up in surprise. Finn nodded, a hint of excitement in his eyes. "I've been thinking. The ranch is doing well. The cattle herd is growing, and with your dress business bringing in steady money, we could expand a bit." "What are you planning, Finn Blackwood?" Rachel asked, knowing the look in his eyes meant he had been working on something significant. "Horses," he said simply. "Not just a few for the ranch work, but a proper breeding operation, quality stock that would bring buyers from all over the territory." Rachel smiled, seeing how the idea lit up his face. "You love horses more than cattle anyway." "Always have," Finn admitted. "And this land is perfect for raising them. Good water, plenty of grazing, protected valleys for the winters." "Then you should do it," Rachel said decisively. "Build your horse ranch." Finn looked at her with gratitude. "It would mean more work, at least at first." "We're not afraid of work," Rachel reminded him, "and it would be something to build for the children's future." As January turned to February, and February to March, Rachel's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Faith, now walking confidently and beginning to form words, was fascinated by her mother's growing belly, patting it gently and saying "baby" with solemn importance. The new barn rose on the property, larger and more substantial than the original. Finn hired 2 hands from town to help with the construction and the increasing ranch work, young men eager to learn from his experience. Rachel found she enjoyed having more people around the place, especially when one of the hands, Frederick, turned out to have a beautiful singing voice that entertained them all during evening meals. April arrived with gentle rains, and the first wildflowers pushing through the soil. Rachel felt heavy and ready, her body preparing for the birth of her second child. Unlike Faith's birth, this time she had proper preparation. Dr. Williams had promised to come stay at the ranch when her time grew close, and Mrs. Peterson was also standing by. The pains began on a clear morning as Rachel was hanging laundry in the spring breeze. Finn was working with the hands in the new barn, but Faith, playing nearby, noticed her mother's discomfort first. "Mama hurt?" the little girl asked, her blue eyes wide with concern. Rachel smiled through the contraction. Just a little, sweetheart. Go find Papa, will you? Tell him the baby's coming. Faith nodded solemnly and toddled off toward the barn as fast as her little legs would carry her. Rachel watched her go, marveling at how quickly her daughter was growing, how confident she was becoming. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and Rachel made her way back to the house, breathing deeply as Finn had taught her. By the time Finn reached the cabin, Rachel was seated in the rocking chair by the fire, her face calm despite the pain. "I've sent Frederick for the doctor," he said, kneeling beside her. "How far apart are the pains?" "About 10 minutes, Rachel said. "We have time yet." Finn nodded, taking her hand. "You're so calm this time," Rachel smiled. "I know what to expect now, and I'm not afraid." She squeezed his fingers. "Not with you here." Dr. Williams arrived as afternoon faded into evening, bringing his medical bag and a calm efficiency that reassured them both. Mrs. Peterson took charge of Faith, keeping the curious toddler occupied in the kitchen while her mother labored. Unlike Faith's difficult birth, this baby came quickly and with less complication. As the moon rose full and bright outside the cabin windows, Rachel gave a final push, and their son entered the world with a lusty cry that made Finn laugh out loud with joy. "A boy," Dr. Williams announced, placing the squalling infant on Rachel's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Rachel looked down at her son, his face red with the effort of his first cries, his tiny fists waving in protest at the cold world he had entered. "He's perfect," she whispered. Finn sat beside her on the bed, his arm supporting her shoulders, his face alight with wonder and pride. "What shall we name him?" he asked, gently touching the baby's downy head. Rachel looked up at the man who had given her a home, a family, and a love she had never dared to hope for. "Franklin," she said softly. After his father, Finn's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "Franklin," he repeated, testing the name. "Little Frank. Do you like it?" Rachel asked. Finn bent to kiss her forehead, then his son's. "I love it, and I love you, Rachel Blackwood, more than I could ever say." They named him Franklin Thomas Blackwood, and from his first day, he showed a determined spirit that matched his father's. Faith was enchanted with her baby brother, appointing herself his special guardian and insisting on helping with his care in her own toddler way. Spring bloomed into summer, and the ranch flourished. Finn's horse breeding program began with the purchase of 2 fine mares and a stallion from a breeder in Wyoming. The cattle herd grew, and Rachel's dress business expanded to include clients from as far away as Butte and Bozeman. One evening in August, as they sat on the veranda watching the sunset paint the mountains in purple and gold, Faith and baby Frank both asleep inside, Finn took Rachel's hand in his. "I was thinking about the day we met," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "How close I came to not finding you." Rachel leaned against his shoulder. "What do you mean?" "I almost didn't check the hayloft that night," Finn admitted. "I was tired, it was late, if I hadn't needed fresh bedding for my horse." "You would have found me in the morning," Rachel said. Finn shook his head. "Maybe not. I often left through the side door without going up to the loft." He looked at her, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. "It frightens me sometimes how easily we might have missed each other." Rachel understood his feeling. So many small decisions, so many chance occurrences had brought them together. If the stagecoach hadn't left her behind, if Robert hadn't stolen her money, if the storm hadn't driven her to seek shelter. "But we didn't miss each other," she said softly, "and that's what matters." Finn nodded, pulling her closer. "When I said I'd waited years for a woman like you, I didn't know how true those words would turn out to be. You've brought everything back to life, Rachel, this ranch, my heart, my hope for the future." Rachel thought of the frightened, desperate woman she had been that stormy night, how certain she had been that her life was ruined beyond repair. Now, less than 2 years later, she had a husband who adored her, 2 beautiful children, a home filled with love, and work that fulfilled her creative spirit. "Do you know what I think?" she said, turning to face him. "I think some things are meant to be, no matter what stands in their way. I think we were always heading toward each other, Finn, even when we didn't know it." Finn smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face into something boyish and tender. "I like that thought," he said. that some force in the universe was determined to bring you to my hayloft that night, and determined to give a lonely cowboy and a pregnant stranger exactly what they both needed most, Rachel added. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Finn drew Rachel into his arms and kissed her with all the love and gratitude he felt. Behind them, the cabin glowed with lamplight, a beacon of warmth and home in the vast Montana wilderness. Inside, their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were deeply loved. And out beyond the corrals and the new barn, beyond the cattle grazing in moonlit pastures and the horses dozing in their stalls, the future stretched before them, a future they would build together, day by day, season by season, with love as their foundation and faith as their guide. For Rachel and Finn Blackwood, life had only just begun, and it promised to be more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to dream.